Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com, how to make a hybrid micarta and wood knife scales. Now these knife scales are kind of unique because we're combining two different media. We're using wood as well as micarta, which in this case is made with colored paper and fiberglass resin. Now unlike standard hybrid knife handles, this process does not require Alumilite, does not require a vacuum chamber at all. It's fairly easy to make. You can get some pretty decent results out of it. Now the process is going to start very similar to just standard micarta. I've cut the two pieces of wood that I'm going to add to the micarta, and in this case it happens to be some maple. Some spalted maple, has some nice lines and texture to it. And I've cut some construction paper that's going to not only fit in my compression mold, but also going to fill the void on top of that wood. So basically, the bottom of the mold is going to be filled with wood, the top is going to be filled with construction paper. And I'm going to use two different color construction papers so that as I grind through that micarta, you're going to have some black and a little bit of brown. I'm using a lot more black because I really want the handle to be, majority of it is going to be a dark black, and it's just going to have a hint of some brown lines. The process starts by laminating or coating with fiberglass resin some full sheets of construction paper, in this case black. These sheets are going to be the liner of the knife. They're going to turn into the liner of the knife, but in reality they're also like the fiberglass, or equivalent to the fiberglass cloth that's going to hold everything together, so that the wood is going to be adhered to this with the resin, and the additional pieces of construction paper will also be adhered to this with the resin. Once, and I think I put 3 pieces of black construction paper at the bottom of my mold. I have wax paper already in the mold. If you want to see how to make micarta, I have a separate video on that. What I just did was I laminated, or I painted with fiberglass resin each of the pieces of wood, and I'm laying them in position. And then what I'll do is start to fill the void above that. And you want to use enough construction paper, or you could even use cloth if you wanted to. You want to coat both sides completely, and then wipe off as much of this resin as you can. And you want to put enough of the construction paper in there so that it's slightly higher than the thickness of the wood. Don't forget, we're going to compress this. And when you compress it, it's going to get a lot thinner than it starts out. So you do want it to be small pieces of paper in thickness to stick over the top or over the thickness of the wood. Now what I'm doing is I'm just going to put 1 or 2 sheets of brown in between, probably 4 or 5 sheets of black. But you could mix this up any way that you wanted. If you put 1 sheet of brown in, then you can have a very thin line of brown when on the finished product. If you put multiple layers of brown together, you'll end up with a nice thick border, or a nice thick layer of brown, and it'll just show up a little bit better. But you could do this with any colors at all. So now I'm pretty much filled up the void above the wood. My micarta mold is just made from 3 pieces of 4x4. And I screwed 2 of them onto a base piece of plywood, and I screwed the other one onto another piece of plywood, and one piece basically fits into the other. You'll see in a minute. And then they clamp just with, you could use any type of clamps. Now I've also put some black construction paper on the top of this concoction, kind of to hold it all together. Most of that is actually going to get ground away after it's hard. But because this thing gets flipped around a bunch of times, I really didn't know which end I was going to, or which side I was going to end up using as the showing wood. So I did want to have kind of a mirror image of the black construction paper that will be used as the equivalent of liners on the knife handles on both sides. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this micarta hybrid up in the wax paper, nice and tight without any wrinkles in the paper. And you'll notice that the wax paper is slightly longer than my press is, and that's on purpose. This way any of the fiberglass that drips out is not going to get on the press. So the press stays pristine, and the excess fiberglass drips out onto cardboard. So the two pieces get put together, and then I'm just going to use clamps to clamp these and put some pressure on them. When you're doing this, you want to take a look at both sides and make sure that it is evenly clamped. So the space in between the plywood and the 4x4s at the top on both sides is the same. And this way you end up with a nice piece of flat micarta. I usually leave it in the press for a good 24 hours. If you wanted to mix it a little bit hot with the hardener, you could probably do it a little bit faster than that. This is the finished piece, or the finished blank. Notice that the black is on both sides. This is the piece after I've sanded off one side of the black. This particular these particular scales are for a small skinner, and you'll see as I'm cutting them out that the top of each handle is going to be showing the wood, the maple, and the very bottom is going to be that black and brown micarta. On this particular handle, it's not going to show a lot, but as I grind and round off that black area, you will see the brown lines from the brown construction paper. This is another hybrid handle, also made from the exact same wood. You can see the brown lines on the end grain of that micarta. This is the same maple as well as black and brown construction paper. Once the blanks are done, they can be rough shaped. I like to kind of rough shape them before I glue them and pin them onto the blade. This is just a drop point blade that I was working on. And then you can finish rounding over all of the edges and carving out the handle to fit your hand. I do a lot of that with a Dremel grinder. You could certainly use a small sander, a belt sander. Here's a couple of the scales, and I'm going to do some hand sanding on these. And once you sand and once you polish them, you'll really start to bring up the shine and what that micarta is going to end up looking like. I'm not going to show you the whole process of gluing and pinning the handles on. I've shown that on a variety of different videos, but basically I'm using a two-part epoxy. I mix a little bit of black paint in with that epoxy just for looks, and I pin it in place, usually with 1/4-inch pins, and I leave it clamped in place for a good 24 hours to dry. Once it comes out, I can cut off the excess pins, and then I can do the finish forming or sanding and grinding on the scales. So this is the skinner and this is the drop point, both made with the same hybrid wood and micarta scales. I'm going to just now do some finish forming. I'm going to grind off the little piece of 1/4-inch pins that was sticking out, and I'm going to round over those scales a little bit and make it fit my hand comfortably. And you can do this on a belt sander or again with the Dremel. It works out real nice. Now you can start to see some of those brown lines at the bottom of those scales. Just rounding over the top of the handle on the skinner. Handle's going to have a lot of character to it. It's going to be a very unique looking handle. And then the final process with this handle is really after you've sanded it. I think I sanded it down to a 220. I then just put it on the buffing wheel. And the buffing wheel really brings it to a nice shine. Of course, you do want to do this with a nice hardwood in combination with the fiberglass or with the micarta. a little bit of buffing compound, and that's the finished product. A very unique looking knife scale. In this case, it's black and brown micarta mixed in with a spalted maple. And these are both of the knives shown in the sun. And this would work out really well with black and blue micarta. You could do red and black micarta in combination with the wood. You know, basically any colors that you think would look good with the wood that you have. And you don't need a vacuum. It's a very easy, very simple process. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, I ask that you give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Please check us out on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com. Thank you.